A winter afternoon in Chicago cut like a knife, the cold biting into skin, the wind off Lake Michigan lashing in hard bursts through the alley behind La Stella restaurant. Sophie Hayes, a 7-year-old girl in a thin coat worn smooth and torn at the elbows, sat curled up on a wooden crate beside the kitchen's back door. Her mother was working a double shift inside, carrying trays, clearing tables, smiling at customers even though her feet were swollen from standing for 12 straight hours. Sophie knew she must not bother her mother while she was working. She only needed to sit still and wait. She liked watching everything. Miss Miller, her teacher, always praised her for having sharp eyes, for noticing the things other people missed. Today, Sophie was following with her gaze a stray gray cat as it prowled around the VIP parking area behind the restaurant. A glossy black Maserati was parked in the reserved spot, so beautiful she could see the dull gray sky reflected on the hood like an enormous mirror. The cat slipped under the car, and then Sophie saw something. At first, she thought it was only a shadow. But shadows do not have wires. Shadows do not have a metal box. Shadows do not have a small red light blinking in a steady beat, beat, beat. Sophie's heart hammered in her chest. Her small hands began to shake, her fingernails scraping at the wood of the crate. She knew what this was. She had secretly watched the crime movies her mother stayed up late with, when her mother thought she was fast asleep. This was something used to kill people. This was something very, very bad. The back door of the restaurant flew open. Laughter and voices spilled out. A group of men in black suits stepped outside, surrounding a tall man with black hair lightly silvered at the temples. He wore a black wool coat, had a long scar on his chin, and eyes the color of cold steel. Sophie had heard the waitresses whisper about him before. Vincent Moretti, the real owner of this restaurant, the real owner of the whole city. They were walking straight toward the car. The red light beneath the car blinked faster. "Stop," Sophie tried to say, but her voice came out as a weak whisper. The wind swallowed the sound. No one heard. The man with the scar was 20 steps from the car. 15 steps. 10 steps. He pulled the keys from his coat pocket. 5 steps. He pressed the button. The car lights flashed. "Look under the car!" Sophie screamed, her voice breaking open with fear. She jumped down from the wooden crate and ran toward them. "Please look under the car. There is something bad under there. Please believe me. Please." Tears streamed down the pale cheeks of the 7-year-old girl, drained of color by the cold. The bodyguards turned, hands moving inside their coats. But the man with the gray eyes lifted a hand, signaling them to stop. And he stopped. Vincent Moretti, the man all of Chicago feared, stood still and looked at the skinny little girl sobbing in front of him. "Check under the car," he ordered, his voice low and cold. One bodyguard knelt down. Then his face went white. "Boss, there is a bomb." The desperate scream of a 7-year-old girl had just saved the life of the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago. But what happened after that would truly change the fate of all 3 people forever. If this story touches your heart, please press like to support the channel. Share the video with those who need a beautiful story today. And do not forget to subscribe so you do not miss the unexpected twists that come next. Those 2 words hit like lightning in the heart of winter. The air thickened in an instant. The bodyguards immediately closed in around Vincent, shoving him back and away from the deadly car. Marco Benedetti, Vincent's right-hand man, pulled out his phone and called at once, his voice urgent, yet still carrying the terrifying composure of someone long accustomed to danger. Vincent stood there, gray eyes never leaving the little girl trembling a few steps away from him. "Sophie Hayes." He repeated the name to himself. A thin, 7-year-old child in a ragged coat had just saved his life. "Evacuate the restaurant. Everyone out. Right now," Vincent commanded, his voice low and final, as if he were directing an army instead of standing only a few meters from a bomb. Everything happened like a whirlwind. The back door flew open, and staff poured out in panic. Shouts, running footsteps, the crash of breaking dishes rang from inside. Someone screamed, "There is a bomb," and the fear spread like fire. In the middle of that chaos, a woman burst through the kitchen doorway. Auburn brown hair spilled in a wild mess, a white apron still tied around her waist, green eyes wide with terror. She whipped her gaze frantically through the sea of people scrambling in every direction, searching for someone. "Sophie, where is Sophie? My daughter. Has anyone seen my daughter?" Her voice splintered with desperation. Vincent recognized her. Scarlett Hayes, the night shift waitress. He had seen her before, passing by like any other employee, but he had never truly noticed. Now he noticed. Scarlett ran toward the parking lot, and when she saw Sophie standing there, surrounded by towering bodyguards, her face turned paler than Chicago winter snow. She lunged forward, dropped to her knees, and crushed her daughter to her chest as if she feared someone might snatch the child from her arms. "Are you okay?" Are you hurt? Oh God, Sophie, you scared me to death. Sophie clung to her mother's neck, sobbing into her shoulder. Mom, I saw a bomb. I was so scared. But I had to tell them, Mom. I had to say it. Vincent stood a few steps away, watching in silence. He saw the way Scarlett held her daughter, the way she checked every finger, every strand of hair, as if that small body was her entire world. He saw her thin coat, her shoes worn down at the heels, the rough hands of someone who worked hard for a living, and he saw the scar, a faint scar on Scarlett's wrist, flashing into view when her sleeve rode up as she hugged her child. Vincent had seen too many scars in his life not to understand what that one meant. Scarlett lifted her head and met Vincent's gaze. In that single heartbeat, he saw everything in those green eyes. Fear. Not fear of the bomb. Not fear of danger. Fear of him. Fear of powerful men. The fear of someone who had been hurt too many times. She pulled Sophie tighter into her arms, as if shielding her daughter from him. It made something twist inside Vincent. A strange feeling, one he did not recognize. Maybe guilt, maybe something deeper. Sirens rose in the distance. A black truck with no license plates barreled into the parking lot. The Moretti family's private bomb squad jumped out in heavy protective gear, carrying equipment ordinary people would never be allowed to see. 30 minutes of unbearable tension passed. Everyone was moved at least 200 meters away. Scarlett and Sophie sat inside a bodyguard's car, the little girl still shaking in her mother's arms. Vincent remained outside, eyes fixed on the Maserati. At last, the bomb squad leader emerged, holding a metal device that had been neutralized. He walked up to Vincent, his voice lowered, so only the two of them could hear. C4, boss. Strong enough to flatten everything within a radius of 10 meters. Set for remote activation, and it has a backup timer too. Professional, very professional. Vincent nodded, his face unreadable. But inside him something boiled. Someone wanted him dead. Someone with the resources and the nerve to strike right here, on his own ground. Rossi. The name surfaced in Vincent's mind like a curse. He turned and looked toward the car where Scarlett and Sophie were sitting. That 7-year-old girl had saved his life, with sharp eyes and a kind of courage many grown men did not have. Vincent Moretti always repaid his debts, and this was a debt he would repay at any cost. When the crowd had been dispersed, and the police pulled away after receiving a tip from Vincent's people that it had only been a false alarm, the Mafia boss walked up to the car where Scarlett and Sophie were sitting. Marco opened the door, and Vincent bent down to look at the mother and daughter inside. I want to speak with you and the child, he said, his voice still low, but with less of the usual coldness. In private. In my office. Scarlett tightened her grip on Sophie's hand, the instinct to protect her child surging hard. She did not want to go anywhere alone with this man. She had heard too many stories about Vincent Moretti. Stories of violence, of power, of people who vanished without a trace. We need to go home, Scarlett said, trying to keep her voice steady, even as her heart raced out of control. My daughter needs rest. She has been through too much. Vincent looked at her, gray eyes as if reading every thought inside her head. 15 minutes. That is all I am asking. Your daughter just saved my life and the lives of others. At least give me a chance to thank you properly. Sophie lifted her head and looked at her mother. Mom, I am okay. He is not a bad person. He stopped when I told him to. Her daughter's innocent words left Scarlett unsure how to respond. In the end, she nodded reluctantly and let Vincent lead them into the now empty restaurant and up to the office on the second floor. The room was spacious, furnished with expensive oak and paintings. Scarlett guessed each cost as much as an entire year of her wages. Vincent sat in the leather chair behind his desk, while Scarlett and Sophie sat across from him on a red velvet sofa. Tell me, Vincent said to Sophie, his voice unexpectedly gentler now. What did you see under the car? Sophie glanced at her mother as if asking permission, and when Scarlett nodded, the little girl began to speak. Her voice still trembled, but it was clear and astonishingly organized. She told him about the stray cat, about the strange shadow, about the wires and the metal box, about the red light blinking. She described the position in detail, the estimated size, the way the device had been attached beneath the car. Vincent listened without interrupting, gray eyes fixed on the 7-year-old speaking like a professional witness. When Sophie finished, he nodded slowly. You were very calm and very smart, Vincent said. Many adults in that situation would panic and run, but you shouted a warning. You saved my life and the lives of the people standing nearby. Sophie lowered her head, cheeks turning pink with shyness. I only did the right thing. Mom always teaches me to do the right thing. Vincent's gaze shifted to Scarlett. This time he looked more closely, taking in every detail he had ignored before. The thin coat that was not warm enough for a Chicago winter, the shoes worn down at the heels, surely walked in for years, a slim frame, as if she often gave her share of food to her daughter, rough fingers from hard work, and those green eyes, deep yet tired, the eyes of someone who had endured far too much. "Miss Hayes," Vincent said, "your daughter saved my life. That is a debt I cannot ignore. I want to repay you." Scarlett felt her body go rigid. She knew this line was coming, and she knew how she had to answer. "Mr. Moretti, I am glad Sophie was able to help you," she said, polite but firm. "But we do not need repayment. My daughter did the right thing, and the right thing does not have a price." Vincent tilted his head slightly, as if he was not used to being refused. "You misunderstand me. This is not pity. This is respect. It is how I treat people who have helped me." "I understand," Scarlett replied, standing and pulling Sophie up with her. "And I appreciate that, but the answer is still no. We do not need anyone's help. We can take care of ourselves." She held her daughter's hand and turned toward the door. "Thank you for your time. We would like to go home now." Vincent rose, but he did not stop them. He only stood there, watching as the mother and daughter left the room. His gray eyes did not move from Scarlett's auburn hair until the door closed. Marco stepped in, looking at his boss with quiet confusion. "She refused," Vincent said, with something in his voice he did not recognize himself. "The first time someone has refused me like that, what do you want me to do?" Vincent offered his private car, but Scarlett's fierce pride and lingering fear of him made her refuse. He turned to the window, his jaw tight, watching as she stubbornly led Sophie toward the bus stop in the skin-cutting cold. "Find out about her. I want to know everything. And put someone on them. From a distance, they cannot know." Marco nodded and left. Vincent remained by the window, gray eyes tracking the two of them until they disappeared around the corner. There was something about that woman he could not look away from. Maybe it was the pride in her green eyes. Maybe it was the faint scar on her wrist. Maybe it was the way she held her daughter as if that child were her entire world. Whatever it was, Vincent Moretti knew this would not be the last time he saw Scarlett Hayes. The last bus brought Scarlett and Sophie back to the apartment complex on the south side of Chicago when it was fully dark. Cold wind slipped through shattered panes in the hallway windows, and Scarlett pulled her daughter along faster through the stairwell that reeked of damp mildew. Third floor, apartment 12, a wooden door with peeling paint and a lock so old Scarlett always had to turn the key 3 times before it would finally open. Inside, the apartment was tiny, only 2 rooms. A living room that doubled as a kitchen, with a ripped old sofa and a rust-stained gas stove. A bedroom Scarlett gave to Sophie, while she slept on the sofa every night. The walls were cracked. The heater had been broken for 2 weeks now, and the faucet dripped through the night, making a sad little music for a life of poverty. Scarlett helped Sophie wash with warm water heated on the stove, then tucked her in under 2 thin blankets layered together. Sophie fell asleep quickly, exhausted by everything she had been through. But Scarlett could not sleep. She sat on the battered sofa, staring out through the filthy window at the Chicago night sky, and memories she had tried to bury for years suddenly rushed back like floodwater. 11 years earlier, Scarlett was 16. She had been a bright girl with shiny auburn hair and green eyes full of dreams. Her parents loved her dearly, and life, though not wealthy, had been warm. Then one winter night, her parents' car slid on an icy road and plunged into a ravine. They died on impact. Scarlett lost everything in a single phone call at midnight. Her step-aunt, the woman her father had married after Scarlett's birth mother died of illness when Scarlett was small, had no desire to raise a child who was not her own blood. Less than a week after the funeral, she threw Scarlett out with a small suitcase and a few $dozen. "I have no obligation to raise you," the woman said, her voice cold as ice. "Go take care of yourself." Scarlett ended up in an orphanage on the outskirts of Chicago. 2 years. There were 2 years of hell. She was bullied, isolated, beaten by older kids. She learned how to protect herself, learned not to trust anyone, learned to hide pain behind eyes that looked cold. Then Derek Hayes appeared. He was 25, handsome, smooth-talking, and he worked as a volunteer at the home. He paid attention to Scarlett, bought her small gifts, told her she was beautiful, told her she deserved to be loved. Scarlett was 18, lonely and starving for affection, and she believed every word he said. They married when Scarlett was just old enough to leave the orphanage. She thought she had found safe ground, thought the nightmare was over. She was completely wrong. The first beating came after 3 months. Derek came home drunk, and when Scarlett asked where he had been, he slapped her to the floor. "I am your husband. "You do not have the right to question me," he roared. Scarlett lay there, her cheek burning, trying to convince herself it was an accident. He was drunk. He did not mean it, but the beatings kept coming, more and more often, more and more brutal. Derek hit her because the food was not hot enough, hit her because the house was not clean enough, hit her because she looked at another man on the street, hit her for any reason he felt like inventing. Then came the insults. "You are useless. No one would ever love you. You should be grateful I married you at all." Derek repeated those words until Scarlett began to believe they were true. He locked her inside the house, forbade her to work, forbade her to see anyone. The windows were nailed shut, the keys were hidden away, and Scarlett became a prisoner in her own home. She was so alone that sometimes she talked to the walls just to hear a human voice. Now, sitting in this ruined little apartment, Scarlett looked down at the faint scar on her wrist. The mark from the night she nearly gave up completely. The night she thought death would be kinder than living. But then she discovered she was pregnant, and everything changed. Scarlett wiped her tears and stood, walking into the bedroom to look at Sophie sleeping soundly. Her daughter, the reason she was still alive, the reason she fought every day. She bent and kissed Sophie's forehead, whispering like a vow, "I will never let anyone hurt you. Never." The memories kept drilling deeper into Scarlett's mind like invisible blades. She remembered the first time she became pregnant. She was 20 then, after 2 years of living in hell with Derek. When she saw the 2 red lines on the test, Scarlett cried with happiness. She thought the baby would change everything. She thought Derek would change when he became a father. She was wrong again. When Scarlett told him she was pregnant, Derek showed no joy at all. He exploded, convinced the child would cost money, would be a nuisance, would mean Scarlett would no longer have time to serve him. That night, in a crazed, drunken rage, Derek drove his fist straight into Scarlett's belly. Once, twice, 3 times. She crumpled to the floor, clutching her stomach, begging him to stop, but he did not stop. Blood poured out, soaking the floor, and Scarlett lost her first child right there in the very room where she had been kept captive. Derek would not let her go to the hospital. He forced her to deal with it herself, as if the small life that had just been lost meant nothing at all. Scarlett lay on the freezing floor through that entire night, crying without a sound, and swore to herself she would find a way to escape. A year later, Scarlett became pregnant again. This time she kept it secret, saying nothing to Derek until her belly grew too large to hide. And when he discovered it, Scarlett already had an escape plan ready. One night, when Derek was dead drunk and passed out, she took the spare key she had secretly hidden for months, opened the door, and ran. She ran into the darkness, pregnant, barefoot on icy streets, with only a few dozen dollars in her coat pocket. She thought she had escaped. She was wrong. Derek found her after 3 days. He dragged her out of the cheap motel where she was hiding, hauled her back home, and locked the door again. The beating that night was the most savage Scarlett had ever endured. Derek kicked her in the ribs until he heard bones crack. He grabbed her hair and pulled her across the floor, ignoring her pleas for him to think about the baby. "You want to leave me? You think you can go?" Derek roared. "You will never escape me. Do you hear me? Never." Scarlett lay there with 2 broken ribs, praying for only one thing, that the child in her womb would survive. And Sophie survived. She was born tiny, thin, but healthy. Scarlett looked into her daughter's green eyes and knew she had a reason to keep fighting. 2 years later, Derek died. He drove drunk and slammed straight into a tree on the highway. The police called Scarlett with the news, and she did not know whether she should cry or laugh. She was free, but freedom came with a massive price. Derek left behind gambling debts and credit debt totaling tens of thousands of dollars, and as his legal wife, Scarlett had to carry it all. For the past 7 years, she had worked every job she could to pay it off and raise Sophie. Waiting tables, washing dishes, cleaning, anything that could earn money. She slept no more than 4 hours a night, ate no more than 1 meal a day, just so Sophie could go to school, have clothes to wear, and have food in her stomach. Now Scarlett pulled the thin blanket higher, tucking it snug around Sophie's sleeping shoulders. Her daughter's face was peaceful in sleep, completely unaware of the nightmares her mother had lived through. Scarlett wanted to keep that innocence forever. She wanted Sophie to never have to know about Derek, about the beatings, about the night she nearly gave up on everything. She looked down at her wrist, her fingers lightly tracing the faint scar. That scar was a reminder of the darkest night of her life, but it was also a reminder of why she was still alive. Sophie, her daughter, the only light in the dark. Somewhere in the vast city of Chicago, a man with gray eyes was reading a file about her life. Scarlett did not know that. She did not know that fate was already weaving invisible threads, tying her life to the most powerful man in this city. She only knew that tonight, her daughter was safe, and that was all that mattered. In the office on the highest floor of Moretti Tower, Vincent sat behind a black oak desk, a thick file laid open in front of him. Marco stood across from him, silent, waiting for his boss's reaction. It had been 2 days since the bombing, and this was the complete report on Scarlett Hayes that Vincent had demanded. Vincent turned the pages one by one, gray eyes moving over the cold lines that recorded a woman's life. Scarlett Marie Hayes, born Scarlett Marie Collins, born in 1998. Her parents died in a traffic accident when she was 16, thrown out by her step-aunt. Lived at St. Mary Orphanage from 16 to 18. Married Derek Hayes at 20. Vincent kept turning pages. Hospital records. Admitted 7 times in 2 years of marriage. Broken ribs. Severe bruising. Head trauma. Miscarriage. Each time, Scarlett claimed it was a household accident, or a fall down the stairs. But Vincent had lived long enough in a violent world to know what those injuries meant. They were not accidents. They were the marks of an abuser's hands. Vincent's fingers tightened around the paper until it creased. Marco noticed, but said nothing. Vincent read on. Derek Hayes, history of violence. Arrested twice for bar fights. Released for lack of evidence. Alcohol and gambling addiction. Died in a drunk driving accident 5 years ago. Left behind more than $70,000 in gambling and credit card debt. Scarlett Hayes, as the legal wife, was forced to shoulder it all. Over the past 7 years, she had paid off nearly half that debt. By working 2 jobs, waiting tables at La Stella from 5 in the evening until 11 at night, cleaning offices from 5 in the morning until 9 in the morning, sleeping no more than 4 hours a day, living in an apartment on the South Side, one of the most dangerous areas in Chicago. The rent was cheap because no one wanted to live there. Vincent set the file down on the desk. His face remained unreadable, but inside him something boiled. He had seen terrible things in his life. He had done terrible things. But reading what Scarlett Hayes had endured stirred a strange fury in him, a kind of anger he was not used to. If Derek Hayes were still alive, Vincent would deal with him personally. He would show him what real pain was. What about the child? Vincent asked, his voice low. Marco flipped to another section of the report. Sophie Marie Hayes, 7 years old, a 2nd-grade student at Southside Elementary Public School. Excellent grades. Teachers say she is intelligent and highly observant. No history of serious illness. Healthy, though somewhat small for her age, likely due to inadequate nutrition. Vincent closed his eyes for a second. He remembered Sophie's thin, torn coat, her cheeks drained pale by the cold, the way she trembled as she shouted a warning to him. A 7-year-old living in poverty, wearing clothes that were not warm enough, yet still brave enough to save a stranger's life. Put someone on them, Vincent ordered. 24/7. Discreet. They cannot know. Marco nodded. Anything else? Vincent stood and walked to the window, looking out over Chicago drowned in night. She refused my help. She does not want to accept anything. She is proud, Marco said. She has had to take care of herself for too long. She does not trust anyone, Vincent replied, his voice carrying something distant. But I will find a way. This debt has to be paid. He turned back, gray eyes sharpening into steel. Now, about the bomb. Any news? Marco pulled out another file, as you suspected. The trail leads to the Rossi family. Antonio Rossi. He hired an outside bomb maker to avoid detection, but we have someone inside his ranks. They confirmed. Antonio gave the order directly. Vincent nodded slowly, his face like stone. Antonio Rossi. The lifelong enemy of the Moretti family. It was the Rossi family that had killed his mother 26 years ago, and now they wanted him dead as well. Do not move too fast, Vincent said. I want to know everything. Who inside our organization leaked my schedule? Who allowed a stranger to get near my car? When I have enough information, Antonio Rossi will pay for everything. Marco bowed his head and left. Vincent turned back to the window, one hand in his pocket. Somewhere in this city, Scarlett Hayes was sleeping in a ruined apartment, shielding her little daughter with everything she had. And Vincent Moretti, the most powerful Mafia boss in Chicago, was quietly protecting them, without their knowledge. The next afternoon, when Scarlett arrived at La Stella to begin her shift, the manager, Enzo Ferrara, called her into the staff room. He was a middle-aged man with a gray mustache and eyes that always seemed to slide away, the kind of person who followed orders and did not ask why. Scarlett stepped in with a tight, uneasy feeling, thinking she might be about to be fired after yesterday's trouble. But what Antonio said left her stunned. You have been promoted to night shift manager, starting next week. Your pay will double. No more waiting tables or clearing dishes. Scarlett stood there with her mouth slightly open. She had worked here more than 3 years and had never been offered so much as a single step up. And now, suddenly, she was being promoted to the highest position available to a female employee in the restaurant. She did not need long to understand what was happening. "This is Mr. Moretti's order, isn't it?" Scarlett asked bluntly. Antonio's eyes flicked away. "I was only informed that you are being promoted. I was not told the reason." Scarlett clenched her hands. She had been perfectly clear that she did not need help. She had refused, politely but firmly, and yet that man still pushed his way into her life, still trying to hand out charity as if she were some pathetic creature to be rescued. "I want to see Mr. Moretti," Scarlett said, her voice hard. "Right now." Antonio went pale. "Miss Hayes, Mr. Moretti is a very busy man. He does not meet with employees unless—" "He will meet with me," Scarlett cut in. "Tell him Scarlett Hayes wants to discuss the promotion. If he refuses, I will quit immediately." 15 minutes later, Scarlett stood before the black oak door of Vincent Moretti's office on the 2nd floor. Her heart beat fast, but she forced herself to stay steady. She had faced Derek Hayes for 4 years. She had survived hell. She was not going to let a mafia boss make her shake. The door opened. Vincent sat behind his desk, gray eyes on her without the slightest surprise, as if he had known she would come. "Miss Hayes, please, have a seat." Scarlett did not sit. She stood straight in front of his desk, green eyes burning with anger. "I told you clearly that I do not need your help," she said, her voice trembling just a little from the effort of holding herself back. "I refused, and yet you still did this. What do you think I am? Some pathetic animal you can toss scraps to?" Vincent said nothing, only watched her with eyes she could not read. Scarlett went on, her voice rising. "I do not need your pity. I do not need your money. I have taken care of my daughter for 7 years without anyone. I can keep doing it." "I know you can," Vincent finally said, his voice low and calm. "That is exactly the problem." Scarlett blinked, not understanding what he meant. Vincent stood and came around the desk, stopping a few steps from her. He was nearly a head taller than she was, and Scarlett had to tilt her face up to look into his eyes. In that moment, her sleeve slid back as she lifted her arm, and the faint scar on her wrist showed under the light. Vincent saw it, and Scarlett knew he saw it. She hurried to pull her sleeve down, but it was too late. Vincent's gray eyes shifted, something flashing there that Scarlett could not name. Maybe understanding, maybe sympathy, maybe a quiet fury for the person who had left that mark on her skin. "I know about Derek Hayes," Vincent said softly. "I know what he did to you. I know how you survived, and I know you are carrying the debt he left behind." Heat rushed to Scarlett's face. "You have no right to investigate me." "You are right. I do not have the right," Vincent admitted. "But I did it anyway, and what I learned only makes me want to help you more. Not out of pity, out of respect." He held Scarlett's gaze. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You went through hell and you are still standing. You raised a wonderful child on your own, under the hardest circumstances. That is not something to pity. That is something to admire." Scarlett could not speak. Her throat tightened. Vincent continued. "I am not offering charity. I am offering opportunity. An apartment in a safer neighborhood so Sophie does not have to live somewhere dangerous. A scholarship so she can go to a better school. And this management job is real, not invented. You have deserved it for a long time." He paused, his voice lower. "But if you still want to refuse, I will respect it. I will not force you. The decision is yours." Scarlett stood there, in that large room filled with expensive things, facing the most powerful man in Chicago. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to say no and walk out with her pride intact. But then she thought of Sophie, of the freezing apartment with the broken heater, of the dangerous neighborhood where gunshots rang out every night, of the dim, uncertain future her daughter would face if they kept living like this. Was accepting help weakness, or was refusing only out of pride the selfish thing? Scarlett looked into Vincent's gray eyes, searching for deceit or hidden motives, but she saw only sincerity. The kind of sincerity she had almost forgotten could exist in a man. "I need time to think," she said at last, her voice much smaller than before. Vincent nodded. "Take all the time you need." Scarlett drew a deep breath, trying to put order to the chaos in her mind. She had said she needed time to think, but in truth she already knew the answer. She had known it even before she walked into this room. "I cannot accept it," Scarlett said, her voice steadier than before. "Mr. Moretti, I appreciate what you are offering. I truly do. But I have taken care of my daughter for 7 years. Alone. No one helped us. And we are fine." Vincent did not interrupt. He only listened, gray eyes fixed on her. Scarlett went on, her voice trembling slightly as the feelings she had kept locked down began to rise. "You do not understand. My whole life, I have depended on other people. I depended on my parents, and then they died. I depended on my step-aunt, and then she threw me out. I depended on Derek, and then he turned my life into hell." She stopped, swallowing hard. "I swore to myself I would never depend on anyone again. Never owe anyone anything. That is the only way I know to protect myself and Sophie." The room fell silent. Scarlett waited for Vincent to get angry, or disappointed, or to throw her out. But he did none of those things. Instead, he turned away and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "My mother used to say things like that," Vincent said, his voice low and distant. "She was a single mother, too. My father left when I was 3. She raised me alone in the worst slum in Chicago." Scarlett said nothing, not expecting him to share something so personal. Vincent continued, his gaze still far away. "She worked 3 jobs, cleaning, laundry, and selling on the street on weekends. She slept no more than 4 hours a night, did not eat enough, just so I could go to school and have clothes to wear." He paused. She was proud. Very proud. She refused help from neighbors, from the church, from anyone. She said she did not need anyone's pity. Vincent turned back to Scarlett, something aching in his gray eyes. "She died when I was 10. Exhaustion. Her heart could not take it. The doctor said that if she had rested more, eaten better, she could have lived many more years." His throat tightened, but she was too proud to accept help, and that pride killed her. Scarlett felt as if someone had punched her in the chest. She saw herself in that story. She saw the future she might be walking toward if she kept living like this. "I am not saying this to force you to accept," Vincent said, his voice gentling. "I am saying it because I understand. I understand why you are afraid of depending on anyone. I understand why you want to carry everything alone. But Miss Hayes, accepting help is not weakness. Sometimes it is the bravest thing a person can do." Scarlett said nothing. She did not know what to say. "Go home," Vincent said softly. "Think carefully. For Sophie, not for me." Scarlett nodded and left the office with a heavy heart. She rode the bus home in silence, her thoughts spinning around Vincent's words. She thought about his mother, the proud woman who died because she would not accept help. She thought about herself, working herself to exhaustion every day while her body grew thinner and weaker. That night, after she fed Sophie dinner and soothed her to sleep, Scarlett sat on the old sofa, staring into nothing. She thought of this broken-down apartment, the dangerous neighborhood outside, the dim future Sophie might face if they kept living like this. She thought of her daughter's worn-down shoes, her thin, torn coat, the meals that never felt like enough. Tears began to slide down Scarlett's cheeks. She cried in silence, not wanting to wake Sophie. She cried from exhaustion, from hurt, from not knowing what the right thing was anymore. From the bedroom, Sophie's voice drifted out, faint and drowsy. "Mom, do not cry." Scarlett startled, quickly wiping her face. She went into the bedroom and saw Sophie still asleep, but her forehead was drawn tight as if she were trapped in a nightmare. The little girl murmured again, her voice full of worry even in sleep. "Mom, do not be sad. I love you." Scarlett knelt beside the bed and took her daughter's small hand. Even in sleep, Sophie was worrying about her mother. This 7-year-old child had carried too much, had grown up too early, only because her mother was too proud to accept help. Maybe Vincent was right. Maybe accepting help was not weakness. Maybe clinging to pride while her daughter suffered was the selfish thing. Scarlett bent and kissed Sophie's forehead, whispering into the dark, "I will do the right thing. For you." 3 days later, Scarlett stood outside Vincent Moretti's office door once again. This time, she had not come to refuse or to argue. She had come to accept, even though it made her pride ache. Vincent opened the door and received her, his face unreadable, but in his gray eyes there was something like expectation. He invited her to sit, and this time Scarlett sat. "I have thought about it a lot," Scarlett began, her voice slow and careful. "About what you said. About your mother. About Sophie." She paused and took a deep breath. "I will accept your help, but with one condition." Vincent tilted his head slightly, waiting. "I will not take anything for free," Scarlett said, her voice firm. "Everything you give, I will work to pay back. The apartment, Sophie's scholarship, all of it. I will repay it with my own effort. no matter how long it takes. But I will not owe anyone anything. Vincent was silent for a long moment, looking at her with an expression Scarlett could not read. Then he nodded slowly. I respect that, he said. And I have a fair offer. The night shift manager position is real, not charity. You deserve it because of your ability, not because I pity you. But I need an assistant manager for the entire restaurant as well. Someone who can oversee daily operations, handle paperwork, manage staff. Real work, real responsibility, real pay. He looked straight into Scarlett's eyes. Do you want that position? Scarlett felt her heart beat faster. This was not pity dressed up in nicer clothes. This was a real opportunity. The kind of opportunity she had dreamed of for years, but never dared to hope for. I will take it, she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. And I will prove you were not wrong to trust me. Vincent nodded, and Scarlett could have sworn she saw the faintest hint of a smile pass across his mouth. A week later, a moving truck stopped in front of the new apartment. In truth, there was not much to move, because Scarlett and Sophie did not own anything of value. A few sets of old clothes, a few books Sophie loved, the thin blanket that had followed them through so many hard years. Everything fit into 2 suitcases and 1 small cardboard box. The new apartment was in Lincoln Park, one of the safest and most peaceful areas of Chicago. It was not as luxurious as Scarlett had imagined, but it was clean, warm, and filled with light. 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room, a fully equipped kitchen, and large windows looking down on a green park below. The heat worked well. The faucet did not drip, and the door lock was so solid Scarlett felt safe for the first time in years. But what moved Scarlett the most was Sophie's reaction. The little girl stepped inside, green eyes wide with wonder. Sophie walked from room to room, touching the clean white walls, looking out the sunlit window, then stopping in front of the door to the smaller bedroom. Mom, Sophie whispered, her voice shaking. Is this my room? Scarlett knelt beside her daughter and nodded with a smile soaked in tears. Yes, sweetheart. Your own room. Only yours. Sophie stood still for a moment, as if she did not dare believe what she was hearing. Then she threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing into Scarlett's shoulder. I have never had my own room, Sophie said between hiccuping breaths. I thought only movies had that. Scarlett held her daughter tight, tears streaming down her face. She thought of the past 7 years, the nights they had curled up together on the battered sofa, the freezing mornings with the broken heater, the meals that never felt like enough, the worries that never stopped. She thought of everything Sophie had endured without a single complaint. And now her daughter had her own room, a warm bed, a safe place to sleep every night. Maybe accepting help was not weakness. Maybe it was the right thing Scarlett had ever done. That night, after everything was put away, Scarlett sat on the new sofa in the living room, watching Sophie lying in her bed in her own room. The door was left slightly open, and Scarlett could see her daughter hugging a new pillow, smiling in her sleep. For the first time in many years, Scarlett felt like she could breathe. For the first time, she saw hope ahead instead of only darkness. And somewhere in the vast city of Chicago, Vincent Moretti received a message from his people. They have moved in safely. The little girl is very happy. He read the message, then set his phone down with a faint smile. For the first time in a long time, he felt he had done something that truly mattered. 3 weeks had passed since Scarlett and Sophie moved into the new apartment. Life began to settle in ways Scarlett had never dared to dream. The assistant manager job at La Stella was busy but meaningful, and for the first time she felt respected instead of being only an invisible waitress. Sophie started at the new school near home, where she quickly made friends and was praised by her teacher for her intelligence. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Then Vincent began to visit. The first time he appeared at the apartment door, Scarlett almost slammed it shut. She had not expected him to come, and the instinct to defend herself, sharpened by years of living with Derek, surged up instantly. A powerful man showing up at her home at night had never been a good sign in Scarlett's experience. But Vincent did not step inside unless he was invited. He stayed on the threshold, holding a small chess set neatly boxed, and said he had heard Sophie liked games that made you think. He asked if he could teach her to play chess. Scarlett wanted to refuse, but Sophie came running out and stared at the chess set with shining eyes. Scarlett could not bring herself to say no. That first evening, Scarlett sat on the sofa, her eyes never leaving Vincent and Sophie for a single second. She watched every movement he made, searching for any sign of danger. But Vincent only sat there, patiently explaining each piece, each move. When Sophie made a mistake, he did not show irritation or lose patience. He only gently pointed out the error and guided her on how to fix it. The knight moves in an L shape, Vincent said. his voice low but warm in a way Scarlett had never heard from him before. 2 squares straight, then 1 to the side. Or the other way around. Try it. Sophie bit her lip in concentration and moved the piece. When she did it right, Vincent nodded with genuine approval. Very good. You learn fast. That was the moment Scarlett began to see Vincent differently. He came back the next week, and the week after that. Each time he arrived, he brought something small for Sophie. A book, a box of drawing supplies, a bag of candy. Never anything so expensive it would embarrass Scarlett, but always thoughtful in a way that showed he truly paid attention to what the little girl liked. And he began to ask Scarlett about work. At first, Scarlett answered briefly, not wanting to share too much. But Vincent listened. He truly listened. Not the kind of listening done only to wait for a turn to speak, but the kind done to understand. He asked about the difficulties she faced, offered advice when she needed it, and never acted as if he knew more than she did. What surprised Scarlett most was that Vincent never touched her. Not once. He kept a respectful distance, never standing too close and never making any gesture that made her feel threatened. When she handed him a cup of tea, he took it carefully so their hands would not touch. When he moved past her in the small apartment, he always left a safe space. Scarlett did not know whether he did it on purpose or by instinct, but she was grateful. After 4 years with Derek, after having her space violated and being touched without permission, the distance Vincent kept made her feel respected in a way she had forgotten even existed. One evening, while Vincent was teaching Sophie a new chess tactic, the little girl suddenly looked up and asked, "Uncle Vincent, why do you come to visit me so much?" Scarlett held her breath, waiting for the answer. Vincent paused, then looked at Sophie with gray eyes softened in a strange, gentle way. "Because I like it here," he said simply. "And I like teaching you chess." Sophie beamed. "I like it when you come too. My mom likes it too. She just does not say it." Scarlett blushed, wanting to scold her daughter for speaking out of turn, but Vincent only looked at her and smiled faintly. Not a smug or teasing smile, only the warm smile of a man who was beginning to find something he had lost long ago. From that night on, Sophie started calling him Uncle Vincent, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And Scarlett, though she remained cautious, began to realize that maybe not all men were like Derek. Maybe there were men who knew what respect looked like. Maybe Vincent Moretti, despite his frightening reputation, was one of them. One evening after Vincent left, Sophie lay in bed, but refused to sleep. She watched her mother sitting beside her, reading a story, with eyes full of thought. The kind of thought a 7-year-old should not have. Scarlett realized her daughter wanted to ask something, and she set the book down and waited. Sophie stayed quiet for a long time before she finally spoke, her voice small and hesitant, as if she was afraid of the answer. "Mom, is Uncle Vincent a bad person?" Scarlett felt as if someone had punched her in the chest. She had known this question would come, but she did not expect it so soon. Sophie was a smart child. She watched, she listened, and she understood more than adults like to believe. She had surely heard the restaurant staff whispering, the stories about the most powerful Mafia boss in Chicago. Scarlett did not know how to answer. She knew who Vincent was. She knew about the Moretti family, about illegal operations, about violence and power in the shadows, but she also knew the man who sat patiently teaching her daughter chess each week. She knew the man who kept a respectful distance, who listened when she spoke, who never made her feel threatened. "Uncle Vincent is complicated, sweetheart," Scarlett said at last, choosing each word carefully. "He has done things I do not agree with, but he has also done good things. Sometimes people are not only good or only bad. Sometimes they are both." Sophie thought about that answer, then nodded as if she understood. "I think he is good to you and me. About other people, I do not know." Scarlett gave a sad smile and kissed her daughter's forehead. This 7-year-old had said the exact thing Scarlett herself was feeling, the thing she had not known how to put into words. A few days later, Vincent came with an invitation that surprised Scarlett. He sat across from her in the living room, while Sophie did homework in her own room, and said that next week there was a charity gala he had to attend. It was the annual event for a foundation supporting orphan children, something Vincent had quietly funded for many years. He wanted Scarlett and Sophie to come with him. "I do not belong in that world," Scarlett said, shaking her head. "I am a waitress, Mr. Moretti. Well, an assistant manager, but I am still just staff. The people at that gala are business owners, politicians, celebrities. I would not know how to talk to them." Vincent looked at her with calm gray eyes. "What do you think makes them better than you? Money, status. Those things do not define a person's worth." He tilted his head. "You survived things most of them cannot even imagine. You are stronger than anyone in that room. You just have not realized it yet." Scarlett fell silent, unsure how to argue. "Besides," Vincent added, his voice lighter, "Sophie will like it. There is a children's area with games and activities, and she deserves one night of fun." That was the deciding blow. Scarlett could not say no when it came to Sophie's happiness. "I do not have anything to wear," she admitted, her voice smaller with embarrassment. "All my clothes are old and worn out. I do not have an evening dress or anything suitable for a party like that." Vincent nodded as if he had expected this. "Let me handle it." 2 days before the gala, a large box was delivered to Scarlett's apartment. Inside was a deep green dress, simple but elegant, not so extravagant that it made her feel like she was pretending to be someone else, but beautiful enough that she could stand in a room full of wealthy people without feeling out of place. There was also a pair of heels that fit perfectly, and a small, lovely pastel pink dress for Sophie. Scarlett lifted the dress, her fingers gliding over the soft fabric. There was no price tag, no receipt. She knew Vincent had deliberately kept her from knowing what it cost, because he understood she would refuse if she did. She looked in the mirror, holding the dress up against herself. For the first time in many years, she wondered how beautiful she could look if she had the chance. And for the first time, she allowed herself to look forward to something. On the night of the charity gala, Scarlett stood before the mirror in the apartment and almost did not recognize herself. The deep green dress fit her body perfectly, bringing out her green eyes and the auburn hair swept up into an elegant twist. Sophie stood beside her in a pastel pink dress, eyes shining with excitement. When Vincent arrived to pick them up, he paused on the threshold for a beat, gray eyes passing over Scarlett with something she could not read. "You are very beautiful," he said, his voice lower than usual. Scarlett felt heat rush into her cheeks, but she forced herself to stay composed as she stepped into the luxury car waiting outside. The gala was held at the Palmer House Hotel, one of the most glamorous venues in Chicago. When Scarlett walked into the dazzling lobby with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors, she felt as if she had stepped into an entirely different world. Women in expensive evening gowns, men in tailored suits. Every person seemed to radiate a kind of wealth and power Scarlett had never touched, and they looked at her. Scarlett could feel the appraising eyes, the whispers behind her back. "Who is she? I heard she is a waitress at Moretti's restaurant. She does not look like she belongs here." Those words stabbed at Scarlett like tiny needles, making her want to turn around and run. But then Vincent placed a hand on her back, a gentle gesture, yet protective. He guided her through the crowd, and when a noble-looking woman asked in a condescending voice who this girl was, Vincent looked the woman straight in the eye and answered in a cold tone that could not be mistaken. "This is Scarlett Hayes, someone important to me, and I hope you will treat her with the respect she deserves." The woman went pale, mumbled an apology, and retreated. After that, no one dared say anything about Scarlett again. Sophie was quickly taken to the children's area, but not before she managed to charm a whole group of guests with her intelligence and her manners. When a businessman asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, Sophie answered without hesitation that she wanted to become a lawyer to protect the vulnerable. The answer left the adults silent with surprise, and Vincent looked at the little girl with a pride Scarlett had never seen in him before. After the gala ended and Sophie had been escorted to the car by a bodyguard to rest, Vincent led Scarlett out onto a balcony overlooking Chicago, glittering with lights. They stood there in silence for a long time, the night wind cool and gentle. Then Vincent began to speak, his voice low and far away, as if he were speaking to himself more than to her. "My mother was killed when I was 10, he said. "The Rossi family did it. They wanted to send a message to my father, and my mother was the easiest target." He paused and drew a deep breath. "I came home from school and found her on the kitchen floor, blood everywhere. I sat beside her for 2 hours before someone found us." Scarlett felt her heart tighten. She looked at the man beside her, the powerful Mafia boss Chicago feared, and she saw the lonely 10-year-old boy inside him. "I have not trusted anyone since then," Vincent continued. "I did not let anyone close. I thought loneliness was safer than letting someone matter, and then losing them." He turned to Scarlett. "Until I met you and Sophie." Scarlett felt tears rise in her eyes. And then, for the first time, she wanted to share. She told him about Derek, about the beatings, about the night she nearly gave up completely. She pulled back her sleeve, revealing the faint scar on her wrist in the dim light. "This is a reminder of the darkest night of my life," she whispered. "But it is also a reminder that I survived." Vincent gently took her hand, his fingers brushing over the scar with a tenderness Scarlett did not think a man like him could possess. "You are the strongest person I have ever met," he said. Then he leaned down, slowly, giving her enough time to pull away if she wanted. But Scarlett did not pull away. She closed her eyes and let his lips meet hers. The kiss was soft and hesitant, full of gentleness and respect. Scarlett's first kiss in 7 years, after 7 years of not trusting men, and this time, she was not afraid. In the days after the gala, Scarlett avoided Vincent the way a person avoids a contagious disease. She did not take his calls. She did not answer his messages, and when he came to the restaurant, she always found an excuse to stay busy somewhere else. The kiss that night had awakened feelings in her she thought had died a long time ago, and that frightened her more than anything else. Scarlett had built walls around her heart for 7 years, and in a single night Vincent Moretti had shaken them all. She did not know how to face that. Sophie was the first to realize something was wrong. She watched her mother with those sharp green eyes, noticing the way Scarlett sighed while staring out the window, the way she picked up her phone and then set it down without doing anything, the way she seemed present in the room but her mind wandered somewhere far away. One evening, as Scarlett sat on the sofa staring into nothing, Sophie climbed up beside her and asked in a small, careful voice full of worry, "Mom, are you mad at Uncle Vincent?" Scarlett startled and turned to her daughter. "Why would you ask that?" Sophie lowered her head, tiny fingers worrying the corner of a pillow. "Because he does not come anymore, and you are sad. I thought maybe he did something that made you angry." Scarlett looked at her daughter, her heart tightening. This 7-year-old had already had to worry too much, had already had to read adult emotions and try to make sense of things she should never have to carry. Scarlett pulled Sophie into her arms and held her close. "No, sweetheart. I'm not mad at Uncle Vincent." She paused, thinking about her daughter's question, and hearing the truth inside it. "I am not angry. I am just scared." "Scared of what?" Sophie asked, lifting her face. Scarlett did not know how to explain to a 7-year-old that she was afraid to love anyone, afraid to trust anyone, afraid to open her heart only to be hurt again. She was afraid that if she let Vincent fully into their lives, he would have the power to destroy her the way Derek had. "I am afraid of change," Scarlett said at last, the closest thing to the truth she could offer her child. Just then, Scarlett's phone buzzed. Vincent's name lit up the screen. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked down at Sophie, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. "You should answer," Sophie whispered. "Uncle Vincent is probably sad too." Scarlett drew a deep breath and picked up. "Scarlett," Vincent's voice came through, low and tired around the edges. "Please do not hang up. Give me a chance to explain." "Explain what?" Scarlett asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Explain that I do not regret that kiss. But I regret it if it made you afraid." He paused. "I do not want to lose you. I do not want to lose what we are building. Please meet me. Once, so we can talk." Scarlett looked at Sophie. Her daughter nodded in encouragement, and Scarlett realized she could not run forever. She had been running for 7 years, and it had not brought her happiness, only loneliness. "All right," she said. "We will meet." They met at a small, quiet coffee shop the next afternoon, while Sophie was at school. Vincent was already there waiting, and when Scarlett walked in, he stood up with a tension she had never seen in this man who always seemed so certain. "I am sorry," Vincent said the moment she sat down. "I should not have kissed you without asking first." "It was—" "No," Scarlett cut in, surprising even herself. "Do not apologize for that kiss. The problem is not that you kissed me. The problem is that I wanted it, and that scares me." Vincent fell silent, waiting for her to continue. "I have not trusted men for 7 years, Scarlett said, her voice shaking a little. "Derek destroyed my ability to trust, and now you show up, kind to my daughter, respectful to me, making me feel safe. Do you know how terrifying that is? To start trusting again after you have been hurt too many times." Vincent nodded slowly. "I understand. More than you think." He met her eyes. "I am scared too. I have not let anyone close for 26 years. You are the first person who makes me want to try again." They sat there looking at each other, two damaged people trying to find a way back toward something human. "I do not know where this will go," Scarlett admitted. "I cannot promise anything." "I do not need you to promise," Vincent said. "I only need you to give me a chance. We will go slowly, one step at a time." Scarlett looked at the man across from her, the powerful Mafia boss watching her with sincerity and patience in his eyes. And for the first time in 7 years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe she deserved to be loved. "One step at a time," she repeated, and gave him a small smile. The next 2 weeks passed in peace. Vincent and Scarlett began to build their relationship slowly, just as they had promised. Dinners together, long conversations, small moments that still carried weight. Sophie was thrilled to see Uncle Vincent back again, and everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. But darkness never stays still, and Antonio Rossi had been watching from the shadows the whole time. Rossi was the lifelong enemy of the Moretti family, the man who had ordered the bomb placed under Vincent's car, the man who had killed Vincent's mother 26 years earlier. He had failed once, but he was not the type to quit. And now, after weeks of surveillance, he had found Vincent Moretti's greatest weakness, a woman with auburn hair and her little daughter. One evening, while Scarlett was preparing dinner in the apartment, her phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. She opened it, and the blood in her veins turned to ice. It was a photo of Sophie walking home from school, taken from a car parked along the street. The angle showed her daughter's face clearly, her pink backpack, and even the license plate of the vehicle doing the watching. Along with the photo was a short, cold line of text. Moretti cannot protect everything. Scarlett felt her legs buckle. She grabbed the kitchen counter to keep from falling, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Sophie was in her room doing homework, unaware of the danger creeping closer. Scarlett tried to stay calm, not wanting to frighten her daughter, but inside she was panicking so hard she could not think straight. She called Vincent immediately. Vincent answered on the first ring, as if he had been waiting for her call. But when Scarlett told him about the photo and the message, his voice changed completely. The warmth vanished, replaced by ice. "Stay there. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. I will be there in 10 minutes. Vincent arrived in 7 minutes with 3 black cars and a team of bodyguards. He entered the apartment with a face hard as stone, gray eyes cold in a way Scarlett had never seen. This was not the gentle man who taught Sophie chess, or the man who had kissed her softly on the balcony. This was Vincent Moretti, the Mafia boss. And for the first time, Scarlett was seeing who he truly was. "Pack what you need," Vincent told Scarlett, his voice short and final. "You will stay at my estate until I handle this." Scarlett wanted to argue, but when she looked into Vincent's eyes, she knew this was not the moment. She quickly gathered what they needed and soothed Sophie, telling her they were going to stay at Uncle Vincent's house for a few days, like a little vacation. Sophie believed her mother, excited to go, not knowing the real danger at all. The Moretti estate sat outside Chicago, a massive building guarded like a fortress. When they arrived, Vincent led Scarlett and Sophie into the sitting room, then turned to speak with his men. And that was when Scarlett saw his darkness. Vincent stood in the center of the room with Marco and 5 other men around him. His voice was ice when he gave the order. "Find out who took that photo. I want to know where Rossi is within 24 hours. And if any of you let them be harmed, you will wish you had never been born." The threat was delivered calmly, without shouting, but it was the calmness that made it terrifying. Scarlett watched the hardest men bow their heads to Vincent, saw fear in their eyes, and she understood then that the man she was falling in love with was not only a businessman or a quiet charity patron. He was someone who could order a killing without blinking. That night, after Sophie was asleep in the private room prepared for her, Scarlett lay in bed in the unfamiliar room and stared at the ceiling. She could hear Vincent speaking to his men in the next room, his voice cold and ruthless in a way that made her shiver. She loved Vincent. She could not deny it anymore. But could she love the darkness inside him too? Could she live in this world of violence and danger? Did she have the right to bring Sophie into it? Those questions spun through Scarlett's mind all night long, and she found no answers. The next morning, Scarlett woke with eyes red from lack of sleep, and a mind heavy with everything that had turned over inside her through the night. She stepped out of the bedroom and found the estate still running like a command center. Men in black suits moved through the halls, speaking into phones and radios, the air so tense it felt like it could be sliced with a knife. Vincent stood in the middle of the large sitting room, giving orders to Marco with a face cold as stone. When he saw Scarlett, he finished a few last words to Marco, then walked over to her. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice softening when he spoke to her. Scarlett looked at him, looked at the man she had begun to love, and realized she could not keep going without the truth. She needed to know what she was stepping into. She needed to know whether she could accept all of it. "Have you killed anyone?" The question rang out in the quiet, blunt, and unadorned. Vincent went still, gray eyes fixed on her. He did not look surprised, as if he had known this question was coming. A long moment passed in silence, and Scarlett felt her heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. "Yes," Vincent said at last, his voice low and without avoidance. "I have killed people who deserved to die." Scarlett felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach. She had known what the answer would be, but hearing it spoken still made her dizzy. She was falling in love with a killer. She was letting her daughter grow close to a killer. "Who are the people who deserve to die?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. Vincent held her gaze. People who traffic women, who sell children, men who beat women and never face punishment, people who threaten my family and the ones I protect. He paused. I am not saying I am a good man, Scarlett. I have never pretended I am innocent. But I have rules. I never harm the innocent. I never touch drugs, and I never hurt women or children. Scarlett fell silent, not knowing what to say. She thought of Derek, of the beatings, of the night she almost died. Derek had never been punished for what he did. He died in a crash, not by justice. How many men like Derek were out there, free, still hurting others, never paying a price? But did that justify killing? Scarlett did not know. She did not know what she believed anymore. I need time to think, she said, then turned and walked away. She found Sophie in the garden behind the estate, playing with a cat someone in the house kept. The little girl looked peaceful and happy, completely unaware of her mother's inner war. Scarlett sat down beside her, watching Sophie stroke the cat's soft fur. Sophie, Scarlett began, are you scared? Here, with all these strange men around. Sophie looked up, green eyes clear. No, Mom, I am not scared. Why not? Sophie thought for a moment, then answered in the serious voice of a child, too wise for her age. Because Uncle Vincent is here. I believe he will protect us. Mom, he will not let anyone hurt you or me. I know that. Scarlett stared at her daughter, surprised by the absolute trust in the little girl's voice. Sophie had been through more than any 7-year-old should ever face, had learned to read people from an early age, and she trusted Vincent. Do you like Uncle Vincent? Scarlett asked softly. I love him, Sophie said, and that simple answer caught Scarlett in her throat. He makes you smile. You do not cry at night anymore since he came. I want him to be with us. Scarlett pulled her daughter into her arms, tears sliding down her cheeks. She had to choose. Leave and return to the old life, safe but lonely and poor, or stay with Vincent, with his dangerous dark world, but be loved and protected. She thought of the scar on her wrist. She thought of the years of hell with Derek. She thought of 7 years raising her child alone in poverty. Then she thought of Vincent, the way he looked at her, the way he treated Sophie, the promise of protection he had kept from the very first day. Maybe no choice was perfect. Maybe life did not allow perfection. Maybe all she could do was choose what would make her and Sophie happiest. And deep inside, Scarlett already knew the answer. 3 tense days crawled by at the Moretti estate. Scarlett and Sophie stayed inside, protected by dozens of bodyguards, while Vincent and his men worked without stopping to hunt Antonio Rossi. Scarlett saw Vincent sleep only a few hours each night, his face growing more deeply lined with exhaustion, yet his gray eyes stayed sharp, relentless. And then, on the 3rd night, it ended. Scarlett was sitting in the sitting room when Vincent walked in, his expression carrying something unusual. Not the strain of the past days, but relief threaded with sheer fatigue. He sat down beside her, silent for a long moment before he spoke. Rossi has been arrested, Vincent said. Federal agents. They have enough evidence to put him away for life. Human trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and dozens of other charges. He paused, looking at Scarlett. He will never be able to threaten you or Sophie again. A wave of relief washed through Scarlett's body, and at the same time, confusion rose with it. She had heard Vincent's conversations with his men. She had heard the cold threats. She had been certain Vincent would handle Rossi with the methods of the underworld. You did not, she began, then stopped, not knowing how to say it. Did not kill him, Vincent finished for her. No. Why? Vincent looked down at his hands that had done terrible things in the past. Then he lifted his gaze to Scarlett, and his gray eyes softened in a way she had never seen before. Because of you, he said simply. Because of Sophie. Because for the first time in my life I have something more precious than revenge. He drew a slow breath. I do not want more blood on my hands while I am with you. I do not want you to look at me and see only a killer. I want to be better. For you, for Sophie, for myself. Scarlett looked at the man in front of her, the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago, and saw someone trying to change. Not because he had to, because he wanted to, because of her daughter. Rossi killed your mother, she said softly. You have waited 26 years for revenge. And now you give it up. Vincent shook his head. I am not giving it up. He will pay. But legally, he will die in prison, alone and forgotten, instead of dying like a martyr with a bullet from my gun. He gave a faint smile. Sometimes living in misery is a harsher punishment than death. Scarlett understood. She understood this was a turning point, not only for Vincent but for both of them. He was choosing a different path, a different future, and he was asking her to walk it with him. "I have thought about this a lot," Scarlett said, her voice shaking slightly. "About you, about your world, about what you have done and what you are." She looked straight into Vincent's eyes. "I cannot pretend I am not afraid. I am afraid of violence. I am afraid of danger. I am afraid of pulling Sophie into a life she should not belong to." Vincent nodded, his face lowering as if bracing for rejection. "But," Scarlett continued, and she saw hope flash in his gray eyes, "I am more afraid of losing you. I am more afraid of going back to loneliness than I am of facing your world. I am afraid of never knowing what we could be if I leave now." She reached up and touched Vincent's cheek, feeling the scar on his chin beneath her fingertips. "I am not asking you to become someone else. I am only asking you to keep trying to become better, the way you did with Rossi, the way you have done with me and Sophie all this time." Vincent took her hand, lifted it to his mouth, and kissed it gently. "I promise, I will keep trying, every day, until you do not have to be afraid anymore." Scarlett smiled, for the first time in days. She leaned forward and kissed Vincent, a deep, emotional kiss that sealed her decision. She had chosen to stay, not because she was blind or naive, but because she believed in the man trying to change right in front of her, because she believed love could redeem lost souls, and because for the first time in her life, she was brave enough to gamble on her own happiness. That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep, Scarlett and Vincent sat together on the estate's balcony, looking up at the star-filled Chicago sky. They did not speak. They only held hands in silence. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt peace. 4 months passed like a beautiful dream Scarlett could hardly believe was real. Life in the Moretti estate slowly became familiar. The wide hallways no longer foreign, the grand rooms no longer frightening. Instead, this place became home, where Sophie's laughter rang out every day, where Scarlett woke each morning without the old fear of rent due or the next meal. Sophie was transferred to one of the best private schools in Chicago, where she quickly became a top student and was loved by her classmates. Sophie's teacher often called to praise her intelligence and kindness, and each time Scarlett felt her heart warm with pride. As for Scarlett, she had begun studying in a business management program at the University of Chicago, a dream she thought had died long ago when she was living with Derek. Vincent encouraged her to pursue school, telling her she had the intelligence and ability to do anything she wanted. At first, Scarlett refused, saying she was too old to go back, but Vincent only looked at her with patient gray eyes and told her it was never too late to begin again. And she began again, learning something new every day, rebuilding herself from the ashes of the past. But what made Scarlett happiest was not the estate, or the prestigious school, or the university program. What made her happiest were the small family moments they shared each day. Vincent taught Sophie piano every afternoon, the two of them sitting at the grand piano in the living room, music weaving through bursts of laughter whenever Sophie hit the wrong note. Vincent was so patient Scarlett could hardly believe it. He never showed irritation when the little girl made mistakes, only gently corrected her and encouraged her to try again. Saturday nights became family movie night, a tradition Sophie suggested and Vincent eagerly supported. The three of them sat on the big sofa in the estate's private theater room, Sophie curled between Vincent and Scarlett, eating popcorn and watching the animated movies she chose. Sometimes Sophie drifted off halfway through, her head resting on Vincent's shoulder, and he would lift her and carry her upstairs without waking her. Ordinary moments, but more precious than anything money could buy. Vincent was changing too. Scarlett saw it in the way he slowly handed the Moretti family's illegal operations over to Marco and other trusted men. Vincent focused more on legitimate businesses, expanding the restaurant chain and investing in real estate. "I want to build something I can be proud to leave for the next generation," Vincent told her one night. "Something clean, not stained with blood." Scarlett knew the shift was not easy, knew he was giving up power and control he had built for decades, but he was doing it. For her, for Sophie, for the future they were sketching together. One spring evening, with cherry blossoms blooming in the garden behind the estate, Vincent and Sophie sat playing chess in the living room. Scarlett sat on the sofa reading, glancing up now and then with a smile on her lips. Sophie was intensely focused, biting her lip as she studied her next move, while Vincent waited patiently. Then, suddenly, Sophie looked up at Vincent with clear green eyes. "Uncle Vincent," she said, her voice small but steady, "do you want to be my dad?" The room fell silent. Scarlett stopped breathing, the book in her hand suddenly forgotten. She looked at Vincent and saw his face freeze for a heartbeat, then something fierce moved through his gray eyes. Surprise. Emotion. A deep, buried longing he had kept hidden through 26 years of loneliness. Vincent knelt in front of Sophie, bringing himself level with her. "Do you want me to be your dad?" he asked, his voice rough with feeling. Sophie nodded hard. "You are always here for me. You teach me chess and piano. You make my mom laugh. You protect me and my mom." She tilted her head. "That is what a dad is, right?" Vincent looked at Scarlett, his eyes shining red. She nodded softly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I want that very much," Vincent said to Sophie, his voice trembling. "I want very much to be your dad, if you and your mom will let me." Sophie wrapped her arms around Vincent, and for the first time in her life, Scarlett saw the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago cry. 2 weeks after Sophie's question, Vincent began to act. He contacted attorney James Crawford to prepare the paperwork to officially adopt Sophie. A complicated process, but Vincent was determined to see it through. At the same time, he secretly met with one of the most renowned jewelers in Chicago to commission an engagement ring. Not the kind of showy ring with an enormous diamond that the upper class often chose, but an elegant piece with an emerald green as Scarlett's eyes, surrounded by small diamonds that caught the light. Vincent knew Scarlett did not like extravagance, and he wanted this ring to reflect who she was, beautiful yet simple, precious yet never boastful. One Saturday evening, Vincent told Scarlett and Sophie that he wanted to take them out to dinner somewhere special. Sophie bounced with excitement, and Scarlett felt curious but did not ask much. She had learned that sometimes letting Vincent keep a secret was its own kind of trust. She wore a simple green dress, the same one Vincent had given her for the gala months earlier, and she felt a quiet ache of memory as she recalled their first kiss on that balcony. When the car stopped in front of La Stella, Scarlett understood at once. This was where everything began, where Sophie spotted the bomb and saved Vincent's life, where Scarlett first saw the man with gray eyes cold as steel, where the fates of 3 people crossed in a way none of them could have imagined. Vincent led them inside, and Scarlett was startled to see the restaurant completely empty. No other guests, only candlelight glowing on every table and white roses arranged everywhere. Soft music drifted from somewhere, and Scarlett realized it was the song she and Vincent had danced to at the charity gala. "Vincent," Scarlett whispered, her heart beating so fast she could barely breathe. Vincent guided them to the table at the center of the restaurant, the very table where he usually sat when he came here. He pulled out chairs for Scarlett and Sophie, then took his seat across from them. Dinner was served by employees Scarlett knew from her days as a waitress here, and she noticed every one of them wore the same mysterious smile. After dessert, while Sophie happily dug into her favorite chocolate ice cream, Vincent stood. He came around to Scarlett, and Scarlett's heart skipped when she saw him drop to one knee. "Scarlett," Vincent began, his voice low and full of feeling. "8 months ago, your daughter saved my life with a brave scream. But you saved my soul." He looked at her with gray eyes shining wet. "I lived in darkness for 26 years. I believed I did not deserve to be loved, did not deserve a family. Then you and Sophie appeared, and you showed me I could be better. You gave me a reason to change, to hope, to believe in the future." Vincent drew a black velvet box from his jacket and opened it, revealing the emerald ring gleaming in the candlelight. "Scarlett Marie Hayes, will you marry me? Will you give me the honor of protecting you and Sophie for the rest of my life?" Tears streamed down Scarlett's cheeks, but she was smiling, the brightest smile Vincent had ever seen. She nodded, unable to speak through the emotion. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes, I will." Vincent slipped the ring onto Scarlett's finger, then rose and pulled her into his arms. They kissed in the empty restaurant under the warm candlelight, and Scarlett felt as if her life had finally begun to move in the right direction. Sophie sprang up from her chair, her chocolate ice cream completely forgotten. "I have a dad," she shouted, running to wrap her arms around Vincent's legs. "I really have a dad." Vincent knelt and hugged Sophie, then looked at her with seriousness softened by love. "Uncle," he corrected himself with a faint, tender smile. "Dad has one more thing to tell you." He pulled a set of documents from inside his suit jacket. "These are the papers for my official adoption of you. After your mother and I get married, you will officially become Sophie Marie Moretti. You will be my daughter in the eyes of the law, and no one can change that. Do you agree?" Sophie looked at the papers, then at her mother, then at Vincent. The little girl's green eyes filled with tears of happiness. "I agree," she said, her voice trembling. "I want to be your daughter. I want to have the Moretti name." All 3 of them held each other in the middle of La Stella, crying and laughing at the same time. The employees watched from a distance, and many of them were wiping their eyes. Marco stood in the corner of the room, and even his usual hard face softened as he watched. That night on the drive back to the estate, Sophie slept in Scarlett's arms, her pink dress wrinkled from all the jumping she had done. Vincent held Scarlett's hand, his thumb brushing over the engagement ring on her finger. "Thank you," Vincent whispered. "Thank you for giving me a family." Scarlett rested her head on his shoulder, looking down at her sleeping daughter and the ring sparkling on her hand. "Thank you for becoming our family," she replied. And in that moment, beneath the star-filled Chicago sky, Scarlett knew she had finally found where she belonged. Summer came to Chicago, bringing warm sunlight and blossoms spilling through the garden behind the Moretti estate. The wedding was held on a June afternoon, when a golden sunset laid itself over rows of white roses and an arch dressed in pale blue ribbons. Scarlett had refused the lavish celebration Vincent offered, the kind with hundreds of guests and glittering spectacle. She wanted something small, intimate, only the people who truly mattered. And Vincent, as always, honored what she wanted. There were only about 30 guests, but every one of them carried a special meaning. Marco stood beside Vincent as best man, and the hard, guarded look he wore most days softened into a rare smile. Thomas Wright, the Moretti family's loyal butler for 30 years, sat in the front row with eyes reddened by emotion. Maggie O'Brien, the kind neighbor from Scarlett's old apartment building, had been invited and could not stop dabbing at her tears with a lace handkerchief. A few of Scarlett's former co-workers from La Stella were there as well, the ones who had watched her journey from a struggling waitress to the bride of Vincent Moretti. But the most unexpected guest was Detective Sarah Chen. She arrived in an elegant gray suit, carrying a small box. When she saw Sophie in a pale pink junior bridesmaid dress, she knelt and opened the box. "Sophie Hayes," Detective Chen said, her voice formal but warm, "for your brave action that saved many lives, the Chicago Police Department would like to present you with a Citizen's Medal of Courage." She pinned the small medal to Sophie's dress. "You are the bravest little girl I have ever met." Sophie looked down at the shining medal on her chest, then lifted her face to Detective Chen, eyes bright. "Thank you, Detective Chen. I will keep it forever." When the wedding music began, Scarlett stepped out from the back doors of the estate. She wore a simple white gown, elegant without any long train or heavy embellishment, only soft silk that fit her perfectly. Her auburn hair was swept up, revealing the graceful line of her neck and the pearl earrings Vincent had given her that morning. She walked alone down the flower-strewn aisle. No one escorted her to the altar, because her father had been gone for a long time. But that did not make her sad. She had walked through so much hardship on her own, and today she walked with pride to the man she loved. On her own 2 feet, Vincent stood beneath the arch, gray eyes never leaving Scarlett for a single second. He wore a classic black suit, his hair neatly combed, and for the first time in his life, the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago looked like an ordinary groom waiting for his bride with a heart full of love. The ceremony was led by an elderly priest Vincent had known since childhood, the man who had comforted him after his mother died. When it came time for vows, Vincent took Scarlett's hands and looked straight into her eyes. "Scarlett, I once believed I would live and die alone in the dark. Then you came, carrying a light I did not know I was starving for. You taught me that accepting help is not weakness, that love is not a flaw, that family is not only blood but a choice. I promise to love you, protect you, and become a man worthy of you every day for the rest of my life." Scarlett squeezed Vincent's hands, tears running down her cheeks, but her smile never leaving her mouth. "Vincent, I lost my faith in men, in love, in happiness. You gave it all back to me. You waited patiently when I was afraid, respected me when I said no, and loved my daughter as if she were your own. I promise to stand beside you through every shadow and every light, to trust you the way you trusted me, and to build a family with you from the broken pieces of the past." After the rings and the kiss, it was Sophie's turn to speak. She stood at the microphone, the medal of courage gleaming on her chest, and spoke in a clear little voice that carried across the garden. "I want to thank my mom for loving me no matter how hard things were. I want to thank Dad Vincent for making my mom happy and for wanting to be my dad." She paused, thinking, then continued. "That day, I was very scared of the bomb under the car, but if it had not been there, we would not have met. Sometimes good things come from scary things." "I am glad," I shouted. The guests applauded, many of them crying. Vincent and Scarlett looked at each other over their daughter's head, and both of them knew this was a beginning. Not the end of a fairy tale, but the first chapter of the life they would write together. A year had passed since the wedding in the garden overflowing with roses. Summer came again to Chicago, bringing warm sunlight and long, happy days at the Moretti estate. A place now filled with laughter and the steady warmth of family instead of the cold loneliness of years before. Vincent had completed the transfer of all the family's illegal operations to Marco, officially stepping away from the underworld to focus on legitimate businesses. The La Stella restaurant chain expanded to 5 locations across the city. Real estate projects brought stable profits, and the orphan support charity Vincent founded had helped hundreds of children in difficult circumstances. He was no longer the mafia boss who made all of Chicago afraid. He was a successful businessman, a devoted husband, and most of all, a dedicated father. Scarlett had changed too, in ways she never would have dared to dream. She graduated from the business management program with excellent grades and opened her own restaurant, a small, cozy place called Sophie's Kitchen, serving the kind of family meals she learned from her mother when she was little. The restaurant quickly became a favorite in the neighborhood, not because of luxury, but because of its rich flavors and the warm atmosphere that felt like the family Scarlett had built. Every day she stood in her own kitchen, cooking with love, and felt grateful that life had given her a second chance. Sophie was 8 now, taller and far more confident than the thin, trembling little girl in the torn coat she used to be. She did well in school, had many friends, and was taking piano lessons with a professional teacher Vincent had hired. Her Medal of Courage still hung proudly on her bedroom wall, beside family photos and honor roll certificates. Sophie Moretti, that was her official name now, and every time she saw her new last name on paperwork, she smiled with pride. One Sunday morning, the family sat around the breakfast table in the estate's large kitchen. Vincent was making pancakes, an apron tied around him so comically that Scarlett had to hold back laughter. She sat with her coffee, watching her husband and daughter argue over whether the batter needed chocolate chips or blueberries. Morning sunlight poured through the windows, washing the room in warm gold, and Scarlett felt her heart swell with happiness. "Dad," Sophie said suddenly, "today is exactly 1 year since you and Mom got married." Vincent smiled and set a plate of heart-shaped pancakes in front of his daughter. "I know. I am planning a surprise for your mom." Scarlett lifted an eyebrow. "What kind of surprise?" "If I tell you, it will not be a surprise anymore," Vincent said, winking at Sophie, and the two of them shared a secretive laugh. Sophie took a bite, then suddenly stopped, looking thoughtful. She looked at her dad, then at her mom, then spoke in a quiet voice far older than her years. "Mom, I am glad I shouted that day." Scarlett set her coffee down and looked at her daughter through wet eyes. "I am glad too, sweetheart. I am very glad." Vincent came over, resting a hand on Scarlett's shoulder, then looked down at Sophie with an expression full of love. "We are all glad, Sophie, because you were brave, because you saved me, because you gave us the chance to become a family." Sophie smiled, the clear, innocent smile of a child who had finally found where she belonged. Sometimes life takes us through the darkest turns before it leads us into the light. Sometimes the deepest wounds open the door to healing. Sometimes a miracle begins with the brave scream of a 7-year-old girl standing in front of a bomb on a bitter winter afternoon. Scarlett once believed her life would be nothing but darkness and pain forever. But she was wrong. Because even in the blackest night, there are always stars waiting to be seen. And sometimes those stars look like a brave little girl and a man who knows how to love. This story reminds us that it is never too late to begin again, never too late to trust, and never too late to find happiness. No matter how painful your past has been, no matter how hard your present feels, there is always hope ahead. You only have to be brave enough to open your heart and let it in. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, hit like, and share this video with the people you love so you can listen together to more meaningful stories every day. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever lived through moments that seemed hopeless, only to find the light in the end? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear the stories and feelings that live deep in your heart. Thank you for watching today's video. Wishing you and your family strength and a life filled with joy and peace every day. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.